Imagine walking into a pet store and seeing a puppy behind the glass. It looks healthy, it looks happy, and everything seems fine. But what most people don't consider is what that animal went through before it ever arrived at that store. And when you look at the full picture, it becomes very difficult to justify the system that put it there. Today, I am going to make the case that the sale of animals in pet stores should be banned. This is not just about personal preference, it is about a system that is causing real measurable harm. My argument is built on 3 points. Pet store sales are directly tied to inhumane breeding practices. They are making the animal overpopulation crisis significantly worse, and education paired with policy change can actually solve this problem. Let's start with where these animals actually come from. The majority of animals sold in pet stores originate from large-scale commercial breeding facilities, commonly known as puppy mills. These are operations where the priority is volume and profit, not animal welfare. Animals are kept in overcrowded cages, receive little to no veterinary care, and are bred repeatedly with no regard for their physical or psychological well-being. The ASPCA has documented what they call the puppy mill pipeline, a direct supply chain between these facilities and pet store shelves. This means that every purchase made at a pet store is knowingly or not a financial contribution to that system. And the consequences are not just theoretical. A peer-reviewed study published in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association found that dogs obtained from pet stores were 30 to 60% more likely to show aggression towards strangers, fear of other dogs, and separation anxiety compared to dogs obtained from responsible breeders. These are not minor behavioral quirks. These are the direct, documented result of the conditions these animals are raised in. Many of these animals were separated from their mothers too early and spent the most critical period of their development in a cage with minimal human contact. By the time they reach a store, the damage has already been done. Consumers just don't see it. Some argue that the government regulations make this a non-issue, but those regulations are often minimal and inconsistently enforced. The problem persists precisely because the oversight in place is not strong enough to stop them. Pointing to the existence of regulations without examining their effectiveness is not a real answer to what is happening. The second issue goes beyond individual animals. It is a systematic crisis. According to the ASPCA, more than 6 million animals enter shelters in the United States every year. Despite the efforts of shelter workers and rescue organizations, hundreds of thousands of those animals are still euthanized annually, not because they are dangerous or unhealthy, but simply because there are not enough homes to go around. That is the reality we are operating in, and yet in the middle of that crisis, we continue to commercially breed and sell animals through pet stores at scale. That is a contradiction that is very hard to defend. Every consumer who purchases from a pet store instead of adopting from a shelter is one fewer home for an animal that is already here and already waiting. This creates a cycle. More animals are bred, more are eventually abandoned, shelters become more overwhelmed, and the people working in those organizations are left managing a problem that the market keeps making worse. Allowing pet store animal sales to continue does not exist in a vacuum. It is actively contributing to the overpopulation problem. The question we have to ask ourselves is, if millions of animals already need homes, what justification is there for continuing to produce more? Now the good news. This is a solvable problem, and we are already seeing real progress. A significant portion of consumers who buy from pet stores are not doing so out of indifference to animal welfare. They simply do not know the full picture. They see an animal in a store and make a decision without understanding the system behind it. That knowledge gap is where change begins. Humane World for Animals identifies public education about puppy mills as one of the most effective tools for reducing demand for commercially bred animals, and that education is already driving real policy change. According to the MSPCA, more than 500 municipalities across the United States have already passed laws prohibiting the sale of commercially bred animals in pet stores. States like California, Maryland, and New York have taken it even further with statewide bans. This is not a fringe position, it is a growing legislative consensus. When people understand the consequences of their purchasing decisions, most of them want to make a different choice. Education changes the demand side of the equation, while policies banning pet store sales addresses the supply side. These two approaches reinforce each other, and together they create a much more durable solution than either one alone. To bring this together, the sale of animal and pet stores supports a system on the profit at the expense of animal welfare. It is directly connected to inhumane breeding conditions backed by peer-reviewed research showing the lasting harm it causes, and it is feeding an overpopulation crisis the shelters are struggling to manage. The path forward is clear. Support legislation that bans the sale of animals in pet stores, invest in public education about where these animals come from, and make adoption the default choice rather than the alternative. Animals are not commodities. They're living beings capable of suffering, and the system currently in place is causing a great deal of it. We have both the knowledge and the means to change that. The only thing left is the willingness to act.